Today's guest is Willie Nicol, a former special branch detective turned no-nonsense mindset coach. We're diving into burnout, identity loss, and how to get your mojo back when everything feels flat.
So someone suggested the police. I thought I'll try this for a couple of years. And 31 years later, I retired. I did a lot of interesting stuff, played college undercover. And it was a joy to see results, to see the bad guys put away and the good guys helped. I ended up the special branch for 4 years, doing a variety of things, some of which I can't tell you about, otherwise I'd have to shoot you.
98% of people will never ask for help, will never do anything with their lives other than what's prescribed for them, what the path they just find themselves on.
And asking for help, counterintuitively, is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of clarity of thought. We all have a choice. You can choose to remain where you are, stuck, stressed, burned out, which is not doing your mental or physical well-being any good, or you can choose to do something about it. The thing I would like to leave all your listeners with is
Ever feel like you're stuck in a rut? Willie Nicol is about to share how to shift your mindset, overcome burnout, and get your mojo back without all the psychobabble. Willie Nicol is a personal development and mindset coach dedicated to helping men break free from stress, burnout, and feeling stuck. After earning a law degree from the University of Glasgow, Willie spent 31 years in the police force, followed by 7 years in corporate security. But when an unexpected redundancy forced a major career shift, he reinvented himself. Trained in life coaching, hypnotherapy, and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, to help others make transformative changes in their lives. Through Willie Nicol coaching, he now works with men who are ready to reclaim their confidence, motivation, and direction without the fluff, just real practical mindset shifts that lead to real results. Willie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Paul. I'm very well. It's a delight to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for coming along and being a guest. Having spent some time in the force, as we discussed offline, having spent 10 years as a volunteer police officer myself, when I got the opportunity to speak with you, I think the alignment was too obvious not to take the opportunity to have you along for the podcast today. So hoping to kind of share some of the gems that we'll both appreciate very much from our previous lives, and bring things to life. But I'm going to start back at the beginning, as I do with all our guests, because I'm a big believer that whilst we might not end up where we originally intended to be, we always get where we're meant to be, one way or another. Usually we describe it as accidental, but I don't believe it is. I think there's an underlying, you can call it destiny, you can call it faith, you can call it a larger plan, whatever you want to call it, but I think there's something there that gets us where we want to go. But why did you choose policing in the first place?
Well, that's quite a long story, Paul. I didn't do very well at university because there were too many distractions. And as an impressionable young man, I enjoyed these distractions. So when I got my law degree, I failed to find a post in a lawyer's office. I was about to get married and decided I needed a steady job. So someone suggested the police. I thought I'll try this for a couple of years. And 31 years later, I retired.
Did you have a feeling when you first joined up with the police? I mean, it's not it never has been an easy process to get through, right? Like, it's quite intimidating and intentional at times. Did you get the feeling that after you joined that this was something that you might end up doing longer? Or was it still just kind of, even when you got through and got to independent patrol, you were still like, yeah, a few years and I'll move on?
There was a bit of that, to be honest. I thought I'll give it, 3 or 4 years. You had to do a 2-year probationary period.
Yeah.
And then if you were smart, you would sit your exams, which unfortunately I didn't do because I wasn't smart. But I got to a point where I began to realise I was enjoying it. I did a lot of interesting stuff, played college undercover, and it was a joy, if you like, to see results, to see the bad guys put away and the good guys helped. So that kind of stuck. And I moved about quite a bit in various roles because I got easily bored and thought, what's the next challenge? So I kind of jumped about a bit. in terms of roles and also locations, which kept things interesting.
Special shout out in today's episode for our charity partners, ADHD Liberty, led by Sarah Templeton, who are part of the fight to prevent the school to prison pipeline for ADHD and neurodiverse individuals. If you'd like to find out more, you can visit them. The show links are in the notes below, and I would encourage you to go along and have a look and educate yourself on their fight. It's an incredibly important cause, and we're super proud to have them as charity partners for the MarketPulse Pros and Pioneers podcast. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your episode.
I think there's a lot of parallels that you've mentioned there, and I can't speak for you, but I put mine down now, knowing a bit more about myself. I put mine down to ADHD, and just that, always a constant search for the next dopamine hit for me is if I'm not learning, or I feel like I'm not learning, even if I am, then I very much get stuck in a rut and start to feel negative about where I am. And I've always done that. I've always searched for more, I think is fair to say. Do you think you see elements of that in yourself?
I agree. The uniform, plain clothes, got a bit bored with that. Plus I was travelling 35 miles each way, commuting, from, if you like, the sticks, the country, into the city. So I made a decision to apply to get a post nearer to home, which I did. I then applied for and gained entry to the CID, which was interesting, murder inquiries, things like that. Then after a few years of that, I was kind of poached to think about going to another department, a special department. I'll say no more than that. And after an interview, a very brief interview, I did up the special branch for 4 years, doing a variety of things, some of which I can't tell you about, otherwise I'd have to shoot you. But very interesting. Close protection, undercover work, agent handling, probably the best 4 or 5 years of my service. It was never a dull moment. And then they decided to promote me into uniform with all that CID, special branch experience. So I went to become a uniform sergeant in charge of other uniformed officers, which was a bit of a culture shock
For everyone.
It lasted for a couple of years until they decided to put me somewhere else, which could possibly better utilise the skills I'd gained previously.
So what then led you to, if I'm going to go back to things, how did you end up leaving the police force? Was that a retirement? Was it by choice? Was it?
It was service retirement. When I joined, 30 years was the limit. I was working in a role in intelligence management for major inquiries, and there weren't many trained intelligence managers in the force at that time. So by the time they got a replacement for me, I had done 31 years and decided kind of mutually it was time to go. So I started kind of looking about for another job, and one fell in my lap, quite funnily enough. And I thought, yeah, time to go. I've got a new job to go to, and that's that.
And it's a fairly typical path, I'd say, for a lot of senior police officers who've done their service in the job. And I don't see a lot of officers these days who actually make it to retirement. I see a lot of cannibalisation well ahead of that time now, and it's certainly not it hasn't got the status that it used to have, sadly, which frustrates me massively, because I'm a huge believer in the police force as a career for a lot of people. But I guess that's a conversation for another day, because that's a whole podcast for another day, never mind a conversation, I think. So you then stepped into another role in corporate security. How do we get from corporate security to being a life coach, Willie? Because that's a huge jump.
It is. And when I look back on it, I realise now that I didn't realise how big a jump that was. I worked for a multinational cash management company. I was the regional security manager for essentially the top half of the UK. The British organisation was run from London, and they didn't really have a lot of clue about the geography north of Leeds. They kind of got maybe as far as the border, but after that it was a closed book to them. And I was left to my own devices. And I worked very hard for that company to sort out the many and varied security problems they had in that region, because they hadn't had a security manager for a year. And the natives had gone a wee bit off-piste and were doing basically what they liked without regard to the security risks. and I was there to make sure that they started to toe the line again. And in addition to that, I project manage a lot of big security installations, alarm systems and new big metal doors and CCTV and whatnot, until we got to a point where I was comfortable that everything was ticking over nicely. And sure enough, not long after that, my line manager, along with somebody from HR, came to see me and hit me with the bombshell that everything's going really well, Willie. We're very, very, very pleased. You've done a great job. However, we're not sure that your role as security manager for this region is required any longer. And it was adios muchachos. So you can imagine, Paul, that I was not best pleased, having worked very hard and been rewarded by the threat of redundancy. However, during this period, my lovely wife, who had done coaching training, suggested I look at coaching as a potential career should the redundancy come to pass. And I dismissed this out of hand as a lot of nonsense because I was a detective. I was very logical and evidence-based, and I considered coaching to be so much psychobabble and mumbo-jumbo. But she booked me on a training course without telling me, and I went along to a little 3-day introduction to coaching and personal development, determined to prove that it was a lot of nonsense. However, at the end of the 3 days, I had changed my mind, having had a few, what do they call them, light bulb moments, epiphanies. I kind of, okay then, right. So, this is still during the redundancy process. And when I eventually was instructed to drive from Glasgow to Leeds for my final redundancy interview, a journey of some 4 hours, to be told that I was going to lose my job, I could see it coming. I was quite calm because I had a little thought of what I could do, and made redundant, gardening leave. Eventually, I was dispossessed of my company car, laptop, etc. I thought, what now? So I put my money where my mouth was, took my redundancy money and trained in the modalities you've already articulated. And then it was, what do I do now? The obvious answer was, I need to set up a business with absolutely no business experience. So I was fortunate in having a lot of nice friends who supported me. And now I know a lot more about business, not everything though, about marketing, sales, and so on and so forth, content creation, visibility, all that good stuff to get yourself known. As my nickname is now the Mojo Man. I help men get their mojo back. So that was, in a very short, condensed story of how I went from cop to coach, which again is my kind of moniker. I'm Willie Nicol, cop to coach, which intrigues people because they've asked the same question as you did, Paul. How on earth do you get from cop to coach?
Yeah, do you know what? I had a similar conversation a couple of weeks back with a guy called Anthony Salimi. And Anthony was a banker who became a coach, but in the meantime also became a stand-up comedian.
Oh.
And I never thought I'd speak to a banker who could stand in front of a room and make people laugh. But, he's been there and done that. And this is what I find as we go through season 2 has been just so fun to record, because some of the journeys that people have been on are mind-boggling from the outside. But once they're explained, they make real sense, and you can see why people went on the journeys that they did. A question for you though, Willie. Do you think that your wife, knowing you probably better than almost anyone, saw something in you that she knew she needed to bring out? Or was it just kind of, well, we need to do something, so let's do this, and I already know this and I can help you with it?
It was the former. My wife's a very intuitive lady. In fact, she's an energy healer, energy artist, and very intuitive. And I guess she did see that I had potential in that regard. In fact, she tried to flatter me by saying, try coaching, Willie, you'll be good at it. And I thought, you can't flatter me into it. Right. A funny story though, after I decided to set up coaching business, I was advised to go networking, to meet people and broaden my visibility and so on. And while walking into a venue, I bumped into a police officer I hadn't seen for, probably 25 years. And we greeted each other enthusiastically. This was a chap called Eddie, who was known as Big Eddie because he was 6'5" tall. And when I met him, I'd done a few years and he was just straight out of training school. And I was allocated the task of being his trainer. So Eddie's 6'5", I'm 5'10", solid because I played rugby. And we made a very incongruous couple, working the main streets of a very tough area in Glasgow. However, Eddie and I got on very, very well, and we had a super time during the training, and eventually we parted ways. So I hadn't seen him for 25 years. And he asked me, what are you doing now when you're retired? And I said, well, I did corporate security and may have set up a coaching business. At which point he laughed at me, which was I thought was quite a bit cheeky. Anyway, I said, okay, Eddie, why are you laughing? And he came out with this, Paul, which I find astounding. He said, Willie, you coached me. I saw you coaching other people. You just didn't realise you were doing it. And I thought, bloody hell, that's the best backhanded compliment I've ever been paid. And that, at that point, reinforced the notion in my head, Paul, that, yeah, I'm on the right track here. I did coach other people and didn't realise I was doing it because I saw that as my function, particularly as a supervisor, to coach your staff, build them up, help them get higher up the ladder, so to speak. And I thought, yeah, okay, that'll do me. And Eddie and I still have a laugh about that.
I love it. But it's true, though, that the people around us tend to see these things in us long before we see them in ourselves. And then we have those light bulb moments where everything starts to make sense. And that's part of what this season's all about. I wonder, though, before we kind of move forward to your coaching business in a little bit more detail, we all see the posts on LinkedIn quite regularly about how wonderful business is as a self-employed entrepreneur and how people are making millions, and the photos of their Ferraris that probably just stood beside in a coffee shop in York. What was the first part of your journey like as a coach? How was that adjustment from the world of policing and security into running your own business?
Well, there are a number of I don't like to use the word challenges, a number of things that kind of hit you. Like, you're in charge, you're your own boss. Whether you make money or not is up to you. Whether you get clients or not is up to you. It's basically, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And bloody hell, right, okay, I better grasp this. How do I make this work? And to be honest, I hadn't really given that too much thought. I'd done the training. I'd had a few pro bono clients that worked very well. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. The business side of it was pretty murky for me. I didn't have a clue, essentially. But as I say, I had some nice people who helped me. And gradually, I got kind of the hang of it, so to speak, the business side of it. I'm still not brilliant at it, to be fair. I'm not a business coach by any means. Oh, I can't help people who are starting out, as I have done recently. But fortunately, very early on at networking, I met a lady who we had a chat, and the point of contact was her father had been in the police. And she said, do you know so-and-so? And I said, well, actually, I don't, blah, blah, blah. What do you do, Willie? And I told her. And a week later, she contacted me and said, I've got someone I want you to speak to. And cut a long story short, turns out this was her soon-to-be ex-husband. They had split up and were in the process of getting a divorce. And she was a bit concerned about he'd got a wee bit off the rails. Had stopped going to the gym and he put on weight and he was just a bit down. I think he could do with a chat with someone like you. So we had a chat and he conceded that he had got a wee bit off track. Stopped going to the gym, stopped playing football, stopped going out with his mates. And he was a bit I suppose is the modern word. The Scottish word would be scurred, which means down to the dumps. And just not at it. And I said, okay, what is it you want? He said, I want my life back. Not his wife back. I want my life back. I want to get back on track. And he had a very good job with a government agency that I won't name. And he was just kind of plodding along. He also decided he wanted promotion. And I said, okay, you want your life back. And I just thought about all the things he'd spoken to me about. And for some bizarre reason, Paul, I said to him, I think you've lost your mojo. Motivation, confidence, that kind of thing. And he looked at me, and for a split second, I thought I'd blown it. And he said, you know what, Willie, you're absolutely right. I've lost my mojo. I'm just not at it. I'm really, really down. I said, okay, how would it be if we went and looked and got your mojo back? And he said, yeah, that'd be great. And so we made an agreement there and then, and we did a 12-week program, and he got his mojo back, and he got his life back on track. And he still keeps in touch with me periodically to this day to keep me updated on what's happening with him. And that was very gratifying that I used the skills I had and the training I had to help that young man to get to where he wanted to be. And I thought, okay, yeah, I could do this. And I'd made the mistake of thinking that was quite easy. I got an introduction, I got a client, helped him, and then realised that it's not that simple. But I plugged away at it, and I get most of my clients through word-of-mouth referrals. I still do a lot of networking, meet a lot of lovely people. But all I say is, I'm here to help. And if you have the courage to ask for that help, I'll be very happy to provide it.
I love to hear the stories behind the early days of people's businesses, because it's the defining moments for us, right? Like we often get into, especially when you start a completely new career or a new business, you always have a vision in your head of, like, I'm going to work with these sorts of people up here, and actually life takes you down its own path and you end up working with these sorts of people over here. And that transition, whilst it's painful, is really powerful as well. And I think it helps us, you know, I don't believe there's many businesses out there that haven't transitioned to a better client type once they've fully understood themselves. You've got to get going. You more or less take anything in the early days, and then you realise what you enjoy working with. And I think you said something really powerful towards the end, though, Willie, was that people taking the choice to do something about what they're doing. And I talk a lot about what I call the 2x2 club, which is, you know, and I just make these numbers up, but 98% of people will never ask for help, will never do anything with their lives other than what's prescribed for them, what they end up doing, what the path they just find themselves on. 2% of those people will ask for help and support from people. But of those 2%, only 2% of those will actually do something with it. And it's powerful to meet somebody like yourself who's working with that 2% of the 2% who are both brave enough and courageous enough to ask for help and support, but actually implement it as well. Because I put words in your mouth here, but I'll be willing to bet that that's the ultimate payment for you in the end. It's not about the money, it's about seeing the results for people, right?
Very much so. The asking for help thing, right? I think as humans, we're conditioned to try and do things all by ourselves, right? Because asking for help could be judged as a sign of weakness, and we're very averse to being judged. We want to be self-sufficient. We want to be the author of our own destiny, all that kind of stuff, right? And asking for help, counterintuitively, is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of clarity of thought. Now, I say to potential clients, you ask for help every day. What do you mean? Well, if your car breaks down, you take it to a mechanic because you don't know how to fix cars. If you get toothache, you go to a dentist because you can't fix your own teeth. Can you help me with this toothache, doctor? Or going to the doctor with a sore leg, or if the heel falls off your shoe, you go to the cobbler to get it repaired. You're asking people for help every day. You walk into the supermarket. Tell me where the baked beans are, please. And you're asking for that supermarket assistant's help to find the baked beans, right? But when it comes to your personal stuff, when it comes to your personal things, oh, no. That's entirely different. That's a different kettle of fish. Because then you have to admit that there is something going on in your life that is not working out well for you. If you have that clarity of thought and that strength of purpose, you think, okay, if I can ask for help to find the baked beans, I can ask for help to address this thing that isn't working for me. And you're right, that's the first hurdle. And then when the discussion's had, will you accept my help? Yes or no? Are you committed to doing what has to be done? Yes or no? If the answer's yes to those questions, I'll say, great, let's go and do it. But if you're not too clever about the help, or you're not too committed to doing something about it, well, you and I are going to part as friends. And I say that quite straightforwardly, because inaction is not an option. Doing nothing is not an option. Doing something, even if it's not great, is always better than doing nothing. And when you put that to people and they get the concept that, again, as I said earlier, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Right? If I'm going to make changes in my life, I'm the only person that can make these changes. I don't make the changes for you. I don't tell you what changes to make. I create an environment where we discuss what's going on, and the ideas, solutions, changes, or whatever will come to the client, even if they didn't know they had them in the first place, because all the solutions are inside us, Paul. Sometimes we choose to ignore it because it might be a bit difficult or a bit challenging. Oh, that's too tough, I can't do that. Or we really don't know. I worked with a client recently who had a good business, who has a good business, a lady, funnily enough, my first lady client in a while, but she's quite shy and introverted. And I met her at a networking meeting, and I could tell right away that she wasn't comfortable. She had to stand up and say her piece, and I noticed that her hand was shaking. I'm an ex-detective, I noticed these things, right? And I said afterwards, you weren't comfortable, were you? She said, oh, no. So I could help you with that if you want. Well, could you? So we went in a conversation over a coffee. And that was it. I'll phone you next week, William, while I'm arranging an appointment. And she did. So my 3 appointments down, she's taking a break at holiday, and we'll have another appointment next week. And she is a changed lady because she now has a kind of quiet confidence about her. She's discovered an inner strength that she didn't realise she had. She always had it. Didn't realise she had it. And we teased that out using hypnotherapy. And again, as you said earlier, Paul, it's very gratifying when you can literally see people change in front of your face. Just the way their face looks, the way that the body looks, the body language. But that is a change. She has changed. And she knows she's changed. She's not entirely sure how. And another acid test is when people round about your client said, they tell me I'm changed, I'm different. Well then, there you go then.
I think what you're describing is probably my favorite part of my previous life in retail, right? Like I was a retail manager, a retail leader. I preferred not to manage, I preferred to be a leader. But actually my favorite part of the whole role was developing other people. Or, as I describe it, helping them develop themselves. Because I think you're right. We all have the answers within ourselves, and constantly going to other people for answers, whilst they might help you discover the answers, if you're getting the answers from other people, then you're always going to be reliant on other people. And there's a power inside all of us, I believe, that we can be the masters of our own career, our own destiny, if you like, our family life, our home life. And I think if more people had the courage to believe that they could find that within themselves, even if they need help to unlock it, even if they need somebody to support them on that journey. Every successful business owner I've had the privilege of speaking to on this show has had that same realization that right now the buck stops with me and I need to find the answers. You know, we can all curl up in a ball and bury our head in the sand and hope these things will go away. And, you know, if I've got a successful business, perhaps you can pay other people to do some of the stuff that you're not an expert at. Brilliant. But ultimately, you need to figure out how to get along by yourself. What I thought was really interesting about how you position yourself as a coach, obviously it's a crowded space, right? There's millions of coaches out there, and it's certainly not alone in being a coach for burnt out men. And hats off to you, Willie. I think it's brilliant because it's something that's quite close to my heart. I see it a lot, especially in ex-retail colleagues, burnt out men predominantly, trying to do too much with too little support. But I find it interesting that you talk about Psychobabble, because you're the only, like I speak with a lot of coaches who have like master coaching qualifications, and they're very proud of all of the, talk about NLP and all these things. And I love the fact that you're not interested in any of those phrases or the acronyms or the terminology. It's just about helping people, right?
Yes, it's about helping people. Yes, I do use NLP techniques. I practice hypnotherapy with my clients. I pick a tool, if you like, from my toolbox, which I think will best fit the situation. But I don't like the Psychobabble. That's a bit of sport. I've got that on my LinkedIn profile. No Psychobabble, no more mumbo jumbo, because I think that people will say, "Oh, thank goodness, I couldn't take any Psychobabble," right? So I positioned myself, if you like, ex-cop, ex-security manager, a straight talker with a sense of humour, but with empathy and compassion. Not judgmental, but I'll tell you straight if I feel the need. If I feel, for example, they've come to me for help and they're not really committed. You said you were committed. Yeah, I did. But I'm not feeling it. Oh, okay, Willie, right. Well, I'll try harder. No, not a question of try harder. You will be harder, right? And if that's tough, it's done. It's like tough love. Right? I'm here to help you. You're paying me. I'm here to help you. And it won't work unless you put the effort in. Because it's all about effort. It's about time, effort. And the money is the last thing on the list. You're investing your time, you're investing your energy and effort, and yes, you're investing a monetary component. But the first two are more important, right? If you want to get to where you want to be. And you're right, Paul. You mentioned the word choice earlier. We all have a choice. You can choose to remain where you are, stuck, stressed, burned out, which is not doing your mental or physical well-being any good, or you can choose to do something about it. I've made bad choices. We've all made bad choices. We've all failed to make the right choice. I put my hands up. Everyone else, I'm only human. People beat themselves up now because, I didn't do that properly. Give yourself a break, right? You made a mistake. You didn't do this or did do that, and it wasn't the ideal thing to do. Put it to one side. It's in the past. Make better choices now. You can change your life. A wee bit like Mission Impossible. This is your mission. You can change your life if you choose to accept the mission. Mr. Hunt, and this tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Right? A lot of people don't make that choice. Or they do make a choice. They choose to remain where they are, in their comfort zone. In that little bubble where they feel safe. But people who push the envelope, burst through the bubble, they're the ones making the progress. They're the ones getting to where they want to be. They're the ones leaving the stress and burnout behind. Or if not leaving it behind, managing it much better. One of people I met in one of my very first training courses, a lady whose name I won't mention, but she helped me immeasurably. A young lady. She did the life coaching, went into business coaching because she had a failed business. She had gone bankrupt. Her husband's business failed. And she was determined that she would do something else. And then she realises business was her passion. So she became a business coach, a very good business coach. And last year, she, as we talked about, wanted a new challenge, wanted to move. And she took her whole family, her husband, her son, her dog, and her horse, and went to Dubai. Because she researched it. Dubai is the place for me, and she runs her coaching business from Dubai. And funny you should talk about fancy cars. She put a post on LinkedIn, her son was beside a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or something like that, right? And it was just a bit of fun. And I commented on the post, well, the name of the son will need to work really hard if he wants to get one of those babies. And she replied, oh, he's already got the mindset. Right? And the lad is 12 or 13, right? Because he's watched his mum do what she's done. I'm thinking, yeah, I want a bit of that. So he's made a choice. If I want to get that fancy red Ferrari or whatever it was, I'm going to have to do A, B, and C. And I wish I'd known that at the age of 13, Paul, that you had that choice if you want to do whatever it is you want to do. Because at that time, you went to school, you did what you got to do, and there we are.
Yeah.
The thing I would like to leave all your listeners with is you always have a choice, right? You always have a choice.
Willie, that's a powerful way to end the episode, and I couldn't have asked for you to end it on a better note. So thank you very much for your conversation this afternoon. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat. I'll make sure that your contact details are in the notes for anybody who might be listening along who thinks, do you know what, that might be a conversation for me to have, or that was really interesting. So I'll make sure they're all in there. Thank you very much for taking the time to be one of our guests today, Willie. It's been a privilege.
No, the pressure's on my mind. I enjoy talking about what I do. If people find my journey, the story of my journey interesting, I'd be happy to talk to anyone. A complimentary, confidential chat, no pitch, no judgment, no nothing, just a chat. If I can help, we'll have a conversation further. If I can't help, I'll do my best to find someone else who can.
Thanks very much for your time today, Willie. Take care and have a good evening.
You too, Paul. Cheers.
Bye-bye.